And I'm going to read from an old favorite, City of Djinns, which I wrote when I was in my 20s.
Right.
And then end with a very short reading from the Anarchy, the final passage of the Anarchy, which is my most recent book, written in my 50s. So you'll have 30 years of literary distance between the two readings. But this is a passage from City of Djinns. This is the UK edition. It looks slightly different in India. And it describes going to meet a man called Ahmed Ali. Now, Ahmed Ali wrote one of the great books on Delhi, arguably the greatest Delhi novel, Twilight in Delhi, which I recommend to everybody. For my mind, the greatest Delhi novel. And maybe the greatest Delhi work of art in literary form. I mean, more so than I can't think of anything else which captures the city like it does. But Ali no longer lives in Delhi, or no longer lived in Delhi when he was still alive, because he was one of the people who fell out at partition. He wanted to go back to what he regarded as his home, but couldn't get a visa and ended up in Karachi in some poverty. And this is a description of me going to see him in, what date was it? Must have been about 1990. He was still alive. He died, I think, in about 1994. So this was meeting the great author of Delhi in exile, as he regarded himself, towards the end of his life in 1990. Ahmed Ali was there to meet us. He wore severe black-rimmed glasses, above which sprouted a pair of thin grey eyebrows. He slurred his consonants and had the slightly limp wrist and effete manner of one who modelled himself on the Bloomsbury original. His hair was the colour of wood ash. For a man once seen as a champion of Delhi's culture, a bulwark of Eastern civilization against the seepage of Western influence, Ahmed Ali now cut an unexpectedly English figure. With his clipped accent and tweed jacket and old leather elbow patches, he could have passed off successfully as a clubland character in a Noel Coward play. But despite his comfortable, well-to-do appearance, Ahmed Ali was an angry man. Over the years I spent with him, he spluttered and spat like a well-warmed frying pan. The first occasion was when I inadvertently mentioned that he was now a citizen of Pakistan. Poppycock, balderdash, he said. I was always against Jinnah, never had any interest in Pakistan. Steady on, said his friend Shanul Haq. The devil, said Ali. Pakistan's not a country, never was. It's a damned hodgepodge. It's not your country or my country. He was shouting at Shanul Haq now. It's a country of a damn bunch of feudal lords, robbers, bloody murderers, kidnappers. The outburst spluttered out into silence. But, I ventured, didn't you opt for Pakistan? Surely you could have returned to Delhi if you wanted to. There was another explosion. I opted for Pakistan. I did not. I was visiting professor in Nanking when the blasted partition took place. The bloody swine of Hindus wouldn't let me go back home, so what do you mean? I went and saw the Indian ambassador in Peking. Bloody swine said I couldn't return, said it was a question of Hindu against Muslim and that there was nothing he could do. I was caught in China and had nowhere to go. Careful, said Shanul Haq, seeing the state his friend had worked himself up into. So how did you end up in Karachi? I asked. When my salary in Nanking was stopped, I found my way to some friends in Hong Kong. They put me on an amphibious plane to Karachi. Where else could I have gone if I couldn't go back to Delhi? Ali had ceased to quiver with rage and was now merely very cross. I never opted for Pakistan, he said, gradually regaining his poise. The civilization I belong to, the civilization of Delhi, came into being through the mingling of two very different cultures, Hindu and Muslim. That civilization flourished for 1,000 years undisturbed until certain people came along and denied that that great mingling had taken place. Views like that can hardly have made you very popular here, I said. They never accepted me in Pakistan, damn it. I've been weeded out. They don't publish my books. They've deleted my name. When copies of Twilight in Delhi arrived at the Karachi customs from India, they sent them back. said the book was about the forbidden city across the border. They implied that the culture was foreign and subversive. Ah! In that case, I said, can't you go back to Delhi? Couldn't you reapply for Indian citizenship? No country is my country now, said Ali. Delhi is dead. The city that was, the language, the culture, everything I knew is finished. It's true, said Shah al-Haq. I went back 13 years after partition. Already everything was different. I stayed in a new hotel, the Ambassador, which I only realized later had been built on top of a graveyard where several of my friends were buried. In my mahalla, everyone used to know me, but suddenly I was a stranger. My Haveli was split into 10 parts and occupied by Punjabis. My wife's house had become a temple. Delhi was no longer the abode of the Delhi one. Even the walls had changed. It was very depressing. Before partition, said Ali, Delhi was a unique city. Although it was already very poor, still it preserved its high culture. That culture filtered down even to the streets. Everyone was part of it. The milkman could quote Mir and Dag. The prostitutes would sing Persian songs and recite Hafiz. They may not have been able to read or write, but they could remember the poets and the language, said Shah al-Haq. You cannot conceive how chaste Delhi Urdu was. And how rich, said Ali. Every mahalla had its own expressions. The language used by our ladies was quite distinct, that used by the men. Now the language has shrunk, so many words are lost. We talked for an hour about the Delhi of their childhood and youth. We talked of the eunuchs and the Sufis and the pigeons and the poets, of monsoon picnics in Meroli and the Djinn who fell in love with Ahmed Ali's aunt. We talked of the sweet meat sellers that stayed open until 3 in the morning, the sorceress who could cast spells over the whole mahalla, the possessed women who used to run vertically up the Zanana walls, and the miraculous cures effected by Hakim Ajmal Khan. The old men swam together through great oceans of nostalgia before finally coming ashore on a strand of melancholy. But all of that is no more, said Ali. All that made Delhi special has been uprooted and dispersed. Now it is a carcass without a soul, said Shah al-Haq. I am a fossil, said Ali, and Shah al-Haq is on his way to becoming a fossil. But nevertheless, I insisted, if you both love Delhi so much, wouldn't you love to see it one more time? I will never see that town again, said Ali. Once I was invited to give some lectures in Australia. There was some mechanical fault, but the plane was diverted to Delhi. The plane landed, but I refused to get out. I said, I'm not getting out. I don't have to. You call your damn chairman, but I'm not putting my foot on that soil, which was sacred to me, and now has been desecrated. They got the entire staff of the airport there to get me out, but I didn't move. How could I? How could I revisit that which once was mine and now was no longer mine? When they asked why I was behaving as I was, I simply sat in my seat and quoted Mir Taki Mir at them. What matters it, O breeze, if now has come the spring, when I have lost them both, the garden and my nest? What happened, I said. The swine were all Punjabi, said Ali. Tell you the truth, I don't think they understood a bloody word I said. That's from City of Djinns, which I wrote in 1991, a long time ago now. Okay, my second reading is from the Anarchy, which is my most recent book, and it's about the East India Company. Unlike City of Djinns, which is a book of conversations and memoirs and biography, traveling through Delhi and taking notes and meeting people and talking to them, this is a work of history. This is research from the archives, and it's the story of how one London company in an office just 5 windows wide in Leadenhall Street in the City of London managed to replace the Mughal Empire. And it's a story full of violence and military activity, of double crossing. And at the end of the book, which is what I'm going to read from now, it makes some comparisons with the great mega corporations of today. And so I'll just read, there's two real subjects to the book. One is the story of colonialism by a company, not by a state, not by Great Britain, but by a corporate entity. The East India Company was as much a corporation as Facebook or Google or ExxonMobil Oil are today. And this is what I'm addressing here. So it's about corporate colonialism. The East India Company has, thankfully, no modern equivalent today. Walmart, which is the world's largest corporation in revenue terms, does not number among its assets a fleet of submarines, neither does Facebook or Shell possess regiments of infantry. Yet the East India Company, the first great multinational and the first to run amok, was the ultimate model and prototype for many of today's joint stock corporations. The most powerful among them do not need their own armies. They can rely on governments to protect their interests and bail them out. Today, the site of the company headquarters in Leadenhall Street lies underneath Richard Rogers' glass and metal Lloyd's building. No blue plaque marks the site of what Macaulay called the greatest corporation in the world, and certainly the only one to equal the Mughals by seizing political power across wide swathes of South Asia. But anyone seeking a monument to the company's legacy in the city need only look around them. This book has attempted to study the relationship between commercial and imperial power. It has looked at how corporations can impact politics and vice versa. It has examined how power and money can corrupt and the way that commerce and colonization have so often walked in lockstep. For Western imperialism and corporate capitalism were born at the same time, and both were to some extent the dragon's teeth that spawned the modern world. Such was the disruption caused in the 18th century by the advent of the East India Company that a whole new literary genre was invented to deal with. This was a genre of moralizing history known as the Book of Admonition or Ibratnama. The monetary purpose of the histories was succinctly put by Khairuddin Allahabadi, the author of the best-known such volume, where he wrote, "As Farhadid istar goshrashti guzargan, barhud ibrat parizad." By considering these past lives, take heed for your own future. The East India Company remains today history's most ominous warning about the potential for the abuse of corporate power and the insidious means by which the interests of the shareholder can seemingly become those of the state. For as recent American adventures in Iraq have shown, our world is far from post-imperial and quite probably never will be. Instead, empire is transforming itself into forms of global power that use campaign contributions and commercial lobbying, multinational finance systems and global markets, corporate influence and the predictive data harvesting of the new surveillance capitalism, rather than, and sometimes alongside, overt military conquest, occupation, or direct economic domination to effect its ends. 420 years after its founding, the story of the East India has never been more current. Thank you. That's from the Anarchy.